Here today, I want to start out by just making a factual statement. Commander-in-Chief is not an entry-level position. We have seen that from our president, who has guided this country, or misguided this country, into wars, into, I would argue, World War III, by signing an agreement with Iran, a country that is run by a group of mullah jihadists who are bent on conquering the world and bringing about the end of the world. They're an apocalyptic Islamic group. And this president denies that they're Islamic, denies that they have apocalyptic visions, and has signed an agreement with a group of people whose religion is focused on bringing back their Mahdi at the end of the world. The end of the world, which according to their language, is at the time of a global conflagration, which can be accomplished with what? A nuclear weapon. So the President of the United States, who has sworn to uphold and defend the Constitution and to protect this country, has just started World War III by allowing Iran on a path to a nuclear weapon where they can go through the process of bringing about the end of times. That's what happens when you put people in positions of power who don't have experience, knowledge, and a background that you're aware of. I know you have never been disappointed by a politician you elected who went to Washington and didn't do what they say they were going to do. How do you avoid that? You find someone that you know and trust, someone that has a record that you can count on. We have a lot of wonderful candidates in this race. A lot of them are doing very well in this race. But none of those candidates have any sort of record to look at. None of them have a record that you can look and say, well, what did he do when he was in a position of authority and power? Did he stand up and fight for the things he says he's for today? We have a lot of conversions when people run for president in the Republican Party. But what we need are people with not conversions but convictions to be the next president of the United States. And you need someone with convictions who have knowledge and understanding of the threats we face overseas and here at home, and also ideas and a vision to be able to bring this country together, to be able to make it strong inside the borders of this country, economically, morally, culturally. That's the kind of leader that we need to be looking at. And I would just suggest to you that if you want a leader who has a record of accomplishment and has a vision that can unite this country on the issue of Iran and ISIS, I'm the only presidential candidate in this race who's been featured in ISIS magazine. And I was featured under the headline, "In the words of our enemy." I am the only presidential candidate listed by ISIS as an enemy of ISIS. I was listed as an enemy for ISIS because I told the truth about them. I told the truth that they're an Islamic state that is dedicated and established a caliphate dedicated to destroy the West and conquer the world for Islam, and that we have an obligation to defeat them. If they have established a 7th century caliphate and act like a 7th century caliphate, my recommendation would be to load up the bombers and bomb them back to the 7th century. We have the ability to do this. We don't have the will to do it out of a president. You have any doubt as to what I will do as president? Look to my record. Iran, Iran came to the negotiating table with Barack Obama because there were horribly tough sanctions imposed on the Iranian government nuclear program that was making their economy crippled. I was the author of those sanctions 10 years ago. And let me tell you the truth about what happened. When I authored those sanctions back in 2004, our government, our intelligence community said Iran did not have a nuclear program. They said we had nothing to worry about from Iran. They had ended their nuclear program. I had better intelligence from the Israelis and from others who I talked to as a senator. And so I put forth a bill saying we needed to put sanctions on that program. By the way, the International Atomic Energy Agency just 2 days ago released a report after having gone through the records of the Iranian nuclear program and revealed that, in fact, Iran did have a program back in 2003 and 2004. And so when we put sanctions on that program, and I proposed it, unfortunately, I was opposed by both parties. I was opposed in the United States Senate. In fact, I was filibustered on the floor of the United States Senate, my amendment, to put that sanction in place. And you know who filibustered me? Joe Biden. And I fought, unfortunately, even against some Republicans. And I came 4 votes short of putting those sanctions in place, really tough ones. And you know who the 4 votes were that defeated me? Biden, Obama, Kerry, and Clinton. I debated Hillary Clinton and Joe Biden on Iranian sanctions 9 years ago. And I was on the right side and they were on the wrong side. You want a record of someone who went out and took on radical Islam, identified the enemy. 2006, I gave a speech at the National Press Club saying what every Republican candidate says now: oh, we have to identify the enemy. Ladies and gentlemen, as much as I love former President Bush, he did not identify the enemy correctly. He called them terrorists. They are jihadists, not terrorists. They are Muslim jihadists, and we need to be truthful with the American public as to who they are. Look at the record of accomplishment. I passed sanctions on Iran. I passed sanctions on Syria. Eventually, those sanctions on Iran passed bipartisanly. I never gave up. You have a lot of folks stand up here today and talk about how they fought. I'm going to tell you how I fought and won, because that's what matters. We got to win, not just fight. It's important for conservatives not to settle for a fighter who loses, but a fighter who wins. And not just on national security. What is the greatest accomplishment of the Republican Congress since 1994, when the Congress came into place, when the Republicans took back power in the House? The greatest accomplishment over that 20 years, the singular greatest one, was the reform of the welfare system. We took a federal entitlement, like food stamps, like housing programs, and we block granted to the states. We froze it, we cut it by 10%, froze the amount of money given to the states for 10 years. No increase in funds. And we required work and time limits on welfare. I authored that bill and managed that bill on the floor of the Senate as a second-year freshman senator. I fought the Washington establishment. The difference, I won. I fought Bill Clinton. Bill Clinton vetoed that bill twice. I could have, and many encouraged me, after the first veto, leave it alone. Let's run the election so we can beat Bill Clinton on it. You know what I said? I'm tired of coming to Washington and just worried about the next election. Let's get something done good for America. I have a vision for changing this country economically. I wrote a book last year called Blue Collar Conservatives. And it talks about a vision of, yes, reforming more of these welfare systems, doing what we did to welfare, do it for food stamps, do it for housing programs, do it for all the other programs that are now exploding and increasing dependency in this country. Reform those programs, put in time limits, put in work requirements. Can it happen? It did happen with good leadership. The leadership on welfare was not about, oh, we need to cut the government. No. Welfare is hurting families and people. We're not going to win this debate by talking about dollars and cents. We're going to win it by talking about improving the lives of people and giving people hope again. The blue-collar message that I've gone out and talked about, I announced from a factory floor in Western Pennsylvania. I said we're going to make America the #1 manufacturer in the world again. We're going to get people back to work. We're going to take those millions of jobs that Barack Obama sent over to China and bring them back to the United States, where hardworking men and women can get good-paying jobs again. And how do you do it? You do it with sound conservative principles. I heard Steve talking about a flat tax. Well, I have the flat tax. It's a 20% flat tax across the board on everything. 20% on individual income, 20% on corporate income, 20% on capital gains. No more games. All income is taxed at the same rate. Everybody pays the same, whether you're a corporation or an investor or a hardworking person in this country. We're going to create opportunities for everybody. It dramatically grows the economy. It helps families, because we have a tax credit that's very pro-family. It helps families with kids, which is getting eaten away right now by the current tax code. And it gets rid of the Internal Revenue Service once and for all. Simplicity, predictability, growth, opportunity, and provisions that really help manufacturing, like bringing the $2.7 trillion sitting in overseas banks from foreign corporations that have made money overseas and bringing that money back to America to invest in manufacturing facilities and other types of products here in America. We need to create an incentive, not for people to leave America because of high taxes, but to stay here in America and bring all those resources from overseas back to America to create jobs here for working men and women. Do you know that 74% of Americans don't have a college degree? And if you listen to even a lot of the Republican candidates, it's all about technology jobs and what we're going to do for business. Do you know that 90% of American workers don't own a business and don't run a business? They're you. They're workers. And yet our message as Republicans, we don't talk about workers. We talk about owners. Owners are important, but you're not going to win a lot of elections catering to 10% of the population. I have a message that talks about creating economic activity, yes, to create opportunity and jobs and growth, but I talk specifically about how we're going to create technical jobs and opportunities and vocational programs. How about bringing vocational education back to our high schools across America so people can get training when they need it in school? We have an opportunity, ladies and gentlemen, as the economy flags, continues to struggle, as people's faith in government, as they're concerned about the security of this country, to nominate somebody who connects with workers, who connects with people who are struggling in America, who has a vision that when they hear the plan, they see themselves in that plan. And at the same time, can calm their concerns about the safety and security for themselves and their friends. You know, up until this week, when you thought of terrorism, you thought, oh, that was going to be in Times Square or New York or in Washington, D.C. or in Los Angeles. San Bernardino is not Times Square. The idea that terrorists are just going to attack us in these high-profile targets, disabuse yourself of that. ISIS is attracting people all over the world, all over this country. And they will strike and will strike anywhere. We have to have a leader who can stand up in this race, who is for the American worker, who is for smaller, responsible government, and who's for stability and security. Someone they can trust. Someone who's been on the right side of these issues, someone who has fought the very candidate we're going to be running against. and been on the right side of history, not the wrong side. We're going to be going up against a former Secretary of State in debates with national security and what the concerns of American workers being probably the top two issues in this race. We better have someone who can stand up with experience, knowledge, vision, and accomplishment to take that on at a time of great anxiety for America. Anxiety at home about their economic future, and anxiety about the safety and security in their own homes. This is too important an election to let anger motivate you to choose a nominee. This is an election about putting someone as your nominee that America can trust. And the best way you know you can trust someone is to look at their record. Look at conviction, consistency, passion, and accomplishment. I stand here as someone who got elected twice to Congress and twice to the United States Senate in a 60% Democratic district for the House. Rod's in a tough district. My district was tougher. 60% Democrat, and I beat a 14-year incumbent Democrat. Then they put me, redistricting put me into a 70% district up against a 28-year Democratic incumbent. And I won that too. Then I went up against a Democratic incumbent. I went up against a Democratic incumbent in the state of Pennsylvania with 1 million more Democrats than Republicans. I ran against James Carville and Paul Begala ran that campaign. Bill and Hillary were in my state. He was president at the time. Carville and Begala were their campaign people. They were in my state. And I beat Bill and Hillary to get a Senate majority in 1994. And in 2000, I ran in Pennsylvania with 1.5 million more Democrats than Republicans, and I was the only conservative to win a state George Bush lost. 500,000 people voted for Al Gore and Rick Santorum. Go figure that one. Because I kept my eye on the people and their concerns. I was a conservative. I had a 95% conservative record, but I got elected in Pennsylvania. You want to win this election, ladies and gentlemen? We need someone who can bring this country together. Someone who can unite us, worker and business. Someone who can unite us on the issue of security. Someone who's going to tell the truth to the American public about the enemy we face and unite us around that goal of defending our principles and values of Western civilization. Ladies and gentlemen, you here in Iowa have a unique opportunity because you make the decision. You are the Human Resource Department for the United States of America. You interview the candidates. You get to do what no other group of people do. You get to see the candidates face to face, meet them, see them, question them. Here's what I would say to you. Pay no attention to the national polls or to the pundits. You didn't 4 years ago. You got it right 4 years ago. You did. How I know you got it right? Because the person you didn't vote for lost. And 4 years before that, the person you didn't vote for lost. Trust yourselves. Don't go with what the media says is the right person. Look for the person you know should be the next commander-in-chief of this country, someone who can bring this country together, lead this country, and defeat Hillary Clinton so America has a chance again. Thank you, and God bless you.
Well, as you know, we have two types of questions. One that's going to be on video, and one or two that may be live. This question comes from one of your former opponents, former governor of Texas, Rick Perry.
Governor of Texas, Rick Perry, and my home state experienced a tremendous resurgence in manufacturing under my administration. There are a lot of people who believe that we've lost these manufacturing jobs forever to those overseas countries. I don't think that's the case. Matter of fact, I think the greatest days of America could be in front of us from a manufacturing standpoint. If you're elected President of the United States, What will you and your administration do to make sure that those jobs come back and we can create the best jobs in the world for our citizens in manufacturing?
Well, you heard me talk about manufacturing, and not only am I going to cut the corporate tax and individual income tax to 20%, but for manufacturers, to give them an incentive, we're going to phase that 20% tax in over 3 years. So first year will be 0, next year it'll be 10%. So we're going to provide an incentive, not just for folks who are manufacturers like Apple, who has $200 million sitting, $200 billion sitting overseas, primarily in China, to encourage them to bring this back by having a maximum 10% tax, not 39% tax, on their assets that they bring back. So that's number one. Number two, if you're a manufacturer in this country, you're going to have a super incentive to come back and grow. We're going to allow for full expensing, a 20% tax, but full expensing. Tremendously helpful for small manufacturers to be able to expand, buy capital equipment, build a bigger building, hire more people. All of those things will now provide tremendous incentives. And I talked about the importance of workforce. I was talking with someone who runs an a repair shop here, a tire place, and we're talking about the importance of hiring people and getting a message to workers in America that it's not below your dignity to go to work in a manufacturing plant or to go to work in a construction job. We have this elitist government popular culture that says everybody needs to go to college and everybody needs to work in technology. No, they don't. They need to get to work, they need to learn a skill, and they need to rise. Get to work. That is important. Here's the other thing. We need to give workers a shot. Immigration. I mean, if you look it up, Numbers USA, look it up. They rate every single candidate on the issue of immigration. There's only one person in that listing, which is a pro-worker, limited on immigration group that gets an A, me. I get the top rating from that group. Why? Because I am the only candidate in this race who is approaching this issue of immigration from the standpoint of who it should be approached by. When you hear the word immigration or immigration reform, what person pops into your mind? If you're like the vast majority of Americans, unfortunately, Democrats and Republicans have convinced you the person you need to be concerned about is the illegal person in this country and their family, right? That's who you think about. When I say tax reform, is the first person you think of the person who cheats on their taxes and how we're going to treat them? No. You think about, how does it affect me? How does it affect my neighbors? How does it affect the American people? We need the same idea when it comes to immigration. We shouldn't be thinking about the people who broke the law. We should be thinking about the people who obey the law and try to work in this country and have good paying jobs. So my response is, I am the only person in this field. There's a couple I'm not quite sure where they are, but they are not quite sure where they are on a variety of different issues. But I'm the only person in this field that I know is not for amnesty. Every other person, I believe, on this stage tonight is for allowing people who are here to stay here. Some say they're allowed to go to citizenship, others say they're legal permanent residents, but in either case, every Republican candidate is for allowing them to stay. I do not believe they should. I believe that people who break the law should be returned to the country in which they came from. I'm the only person on this stage tonight, and the only person in this race who believes that 35 million people coming into this country over the last 20 years, more than any other time in the history of our country. We have more people who are not born in this country here than any other time in our history. And that can be a good thing or a bad thing, but guess what's happened over the last 20 years? Wages have been like this. Wages are not too high. Wages have flatlined. That's why Americans are clamoring for a minimum wage increase. Why? Because they see the effect of the Obama economy and immigration. We bring over 1 million people a year legally and 700,000 illegally into this country. 90% of them are wage earners. And they're working for less to hold wages down in America. I am the only person in this race that says, let's actually reduce the number of legal immigrants by 25% in this country to give American workers a break. You want to have someone who can go out with an economic plan, an immigration plan, to connect with American workers and say, we're going to make life better for you. You want to win Pennsylvania, Ohio, Michigan, Indiana? You want to win that Rust Belt? Elect someone from the Rust Belt who has a message that can win that area.
All right, now on to the live questioner. It's not me. It's not me. You kind of jumped on them. Congressman Rod Blum.
Welcome, Senator Santorum. Welcome to the 1st District of Iowa.
Thank you.
Thanks for being a part.
Pleasure.
This question comes from Steve and Connie Armstrong, who are trucking brokers here in Cedar Rapids. And their question is, we own and operate a small transportation business right here in Cedar Rapids. Federal regulatory policies have strangled many of our customers, some to the point of being forced to close their doors. What are 3 things you would do as president, Senator, to slow down and reduce the regulatory overreach by our federal government?
I know you heard other people come up here. I heard Senator Cruz say this, and I said this 4 years ago. I'll say it again. The great thing a president can do, and the wonderful thing about President Obama, is he's been able to get almost nothing through the Congress. And so he's had to do everything through using 2 mechanisms, well, 3. Executive orders, regulations, rewriting regulations, and administrative interpretation. All three of those things can be changed by the next president on day 1, and you have my pledge. I will repeal and replace every single Obama regulation that impacts American business. That's the easy part. It really is the easy part. I mean, I've already had friends who are working on executive orders, and not just Obama executive orders, but executive orders that go back, some of them many, many administrations, and clean that up and get back to a constitutional form of government again, where the president isn't exceeding his authority every drop of the hat. But we need to put some things in place to stop the next president from doing things. Because I can go in, and I will. I'll change the people. I'll put new people in place. I'll put new regulators in place. I'll repeal the regulations. And then at some point, someone else will come in, some later president will come in, and he'll wipe those all out and put a bunch of liberal policies back at some point. How do we stop that? Here's how we stop it. Rod has an ability as a congressman to vote down regulations. They have an ability. The ethanol regulation is a good example. The president just violated the law. The president violated the law as much as he violated it at immigration, as much as he violated it when it comes to Obamacare. There was no legal authority for the president on ethanol to lower the RFS. None. But he did it anyway because he's an authoritarian. He's the guy that says, I'm going to do it, try to stop me. And the reason he can say that is because when he passes that regulation, it goes to the Congress because it has a huge economic impact. So Rod is able to disapprove that regulation. That's a great thing. But then it goes to the Senate. So I suspect potentially, and it has happened in the past, that the House can disapprove an Obama regulation. But then it has to go to the Senate. And then you need 60 votes, and you need Democrats to help disapprove. And so far, no Obama regulation has ever been disapproved in the Senate. So what happens? It goes into effect. How do you change that? As president, a Republican president, I will go to Republicans and Democrats and say, look, let's change it to, instead of having the Congress disapprove my regulations, they have to approve my regulations. That makes no difference in the House. It's still a majority vote. But in the Senate, instead of having to get 60 votes to stop me, I need 60 votes to do it. So now I have to get a supermajority, Republicans and Democrats. That change alone will put a huge constraint on future presidents. And I promise you, that'll be one of my highest priorities as President of the United States. Thank you.
I guess we have one last question. Now, the other candidates got 2 video, 1 live. You have the luxury of getting 1 video, 2 live, and you're going to get it from the president and CEO of FreedomWorks, Adam Brandon.
Senator, I just wanted to quickly ask you, we were talking a little bit about regulations. I think probably most people in this room are very concerned about an out-of-control EPA. If you were elected president, what are you going to do to rein in the EPA?
I think I just sort of laid out how future EPAs can be reined in. I mean, you have to give the biggest problem in Washington is that we don't have checks and balances going on anymore. We don't have the president stopping the court from abusing its authority. We don't have the Congress checking the president. We have the court checking everybody, but the Congress and the president aren't using their authority to hold each other into accountability. And so, of course, I'd repeal everyone. I'd repeal the Waters of the USA. I would repeal the Clean Coal Initiative. I would all the initiatives, the ozone regulations, which are going to kill manufacturing jobs in this country. All of those would be repealed. All of the administrative interpretations, for example, an interpretation that says that CO2 is a pollutant. Stop breathing, you're polluting. It's not that we can't repeal those, it's not that we can't change them. The question is, how do we hold them? How do we make sure that that doesn't happen again? And part of it is the law that I just suggested. Another part of it is that we have to have a Congress that's willing to exercise this authority. A Congress that's willing to stand up to an executive branch and a court system that has become abusive. The courts in this country, anybody know what our founders thought was the most important branch of government? I'll tell you, the Congress. How do I know? Because they put it in Article 1. You know what the second most powerful branch was supposed to be? The president. How do I know? Because it's Article 2. What's the third most important branch? Article 3. Article 1's this big, long branch with lots of powers, the Congress. Article 2 is a smaller one, mostly national security. Article 3 is a little bitty article. The court's not supposed to be able to run the show in America. And they're driving environmental policy, they're driving increasing and expanding the size and scale of government, and no one is checking them. That is a problem. I can tell you as president, and I can tell you as a member of Congress, I pushed back and I fought the court when it overstepped its bounds. I'm the only person in this race to have taken a United States Supreme Court case. The case was on partial birth abortion. That case, the United States Supreme Court invalidated a Nebraska statute that banned that procedure. It's the procedure, by the way, that Planned Parenthood used to protect the organs so they could harvest them. They were breaking the law more than once. But the Supreme Court said that Nebraska's ban was unconstitutional. Well, I had been fighting this battle for 7 years during the Clinton administration and losing because the president would veto it and we'd come just short of overriding his veto. But when George Bush came into office, the court ruled. I said, let's take on the court. Let's pass a bill that is 180 degrees from what the court said. Let's challenge the court. Let the Congress and the president tell the court, you are wrong, you must change. So we passed a bill with bipartisan support, got it signed by President Bush, and of course, immediately Planned Parenthood brought the case to the United States Supreme Court eventually, and guess what? The Supreme Court changed their decision and we won. That's what we need to do. Fight back. Ladies and gentlemen, you have an opportunity to fight back in this election. Iowa, 4 years ago, you made the right call. You did what your job was, which is to look at the candidates and pick the best one, not who the national media wants. Do it again. God bless you.